Sometimes the best illustrations in vector are just made from simple shapes. So anytime you can look at a photograph and kind of break it down into simplified shapes, it'll look much neater, smoother, and just overall a lot more professional. So sometimes you can leave the outline on your drawings and get icons such as these, or other times, take the outline off completely and just use simple shapes to create your objects. So today we're going to practice using the shape tools and some of the functions in Illustrator to create really simple icons that eventually we're going to use in logo design and other illustrations. So we're going to start building with shape first. And these are great examples. This little Jeep is all outline. And then the background has no outline at all. It's just simply shapes. But we're going to talk about how to combine shapes and how to kind of break things down to simplify them. So in Illustrator, I compiled this little assignment and I just grabbed some images offline. They're just set around this page and I want you to work on the same document. But what you're going to do is choose at least 2 objects to draw using simple shapes. So to get started, let's go over some of the basics with shapes. We've already reviewed how to draw a shape, and there's lots of different ones. Holding shift, remember, keeps things in perfect proportions. But after you draw a shape, you can change the fill. You can change the outline. Sometimes I don't even like an outline at all on my shape, so I can go and change that really easily. I can also modify a shape as soon as I draw it by going to the white arrow tool and, for instance, pulling that rounds all the corners. If I double click on one of these, it'll round just one of them. And then all of these anchor points I can click on and drag out to customize shapes. You want to keep things really, really smooth. That is key. Keep things neat and smooth. And then you're going to stack and combine shapes to create really simple vector drawings. So to smooth things, remember, when you select something, you can really easily go over to the smooth tool and just make sure it's selected. This sometimes will just realign the anchor points or minimize the anchor points, which will in turn help smooth things out. So don't forget about that smooth tool. Also, don't forget about the eraser tool. You can quickly modify a shape by using the eraser tool. And remember the brackets on your keyboard next to the P, the right bracket makes your brush bigger. And sometimes it just is a lot smoother to use a bigger brush. The left bracket makes your brush smaller. And shift always makes like a very straight line with these tools. But I can always go back with my smoother tool and smooth things out if they're not perfectly smooth. Less is more. And then sometimes too, right clicking, you can go to simplify. This is a newer feature that I've just discovered. And you can go and have it made up of less anchor points. That will also smooth it. Sometimes it does change the shape just a little, but it simplifies it a bit, which makes it nice. Okay, so those are some of the things we've already reviewed, but I want to add a few more. So your goal today is to try to redraw some of these, at least 2 of these items. So zoom out, Control minus, and then just pull one over onto your screen, zoom in, and just break this into basic shapes. So I'm going to go over a couple of the tools as I do this. So this, I can automatically see some rectangles happening. And we are going to simplify these. They don't need to look exactly like the object, but I want to create essentially a simple icon or logo of this object. So it can be simplified for sure. So for this, I'm kind of looking at it and it looks like it's made up of something like this. For now, I might just even work in black and white. So you have this, I can then go in and maybe I double click here, this bottom corner. So I'm looking at the bristles right now. Oops, double click on this anchor point around that corner. So maybe I get a shape like this. Okay, now I'm going to add this portion and I can start to add in the lines and stuff later. So I'm just going to build this up. I'm going to do the regular rectangle tool again. And this looks like it's about this big. Okay. I'm going to put a little space there. Sometimes just using the positive and negative space will help break out the elements, but I'll show you in just a sec how I'm going to round that out. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is do another shape here. And I'm just going to build it out of simple shapes, like I said. So, arrow tool, over. And there are little guides that appear to help me know, like, if things are exactly the same width, because this is actually the same width. Oops. Control Z if you mess up. Same width. See that little guide that pops up? Okay, and then I'm going to use, let's try the ellipse tool. I think that will work well for maybe the handle part. Now, I am going to modify this. Okay, so essentially, I'm just kind of building this up. Now, let's talk about ways to modify the shapes. So right now, they're all separate shapes, but I'm going to start bringing these things together. For instance, I could take these bristles and I could add a white outline. Okay, and I could make the outline white a little thicker here. Now, once I move this down, so sometimes I use my arrows on the keyboard to do this. If I move this over top of this, I have to right click, arrange, bring to the front, because I drew that shape first. So I can arrange, bring to the front. I'm not holding on, sorry. Arrange, bring to the front. Automatically, that kind of gives the illusion of that shape there. And now I'm looking at this and going, I need to round these out a bit too. But see, that's automatically kind of giving a bit more. It has a white outline on it. Now you can also say you're using different colors. I could take this shape. Let me move this over. I could copy and paste this shape for now. I could set it on top of this shape. And let's turn off the outline so you can get a better idea. So I can either add an outline and overlap them, or I can overlap them in this way. Let me change the color so you can see. Grab both of these with your arrow tool, and you can use the shape builder tool. So the shape builder tool will add or subtract areas of a shape together. So I can go here, and I don't want to add this. I want to actually subtract this whole shape. I copied and pasted this whole shape from this. So it just creates this rounded shape. So it's got a plus sign automatically. What I need to do is select both shapes and then hold the Alt key so it's a minus sign and get rid of those two shapes. And it leaves me with this one. So essentially, I just cut this shape away from a normal rounded rectangle. So that's the add or subtract. So it's looking pretty good. So I can do the exact same thing down here as well. Maybe I need to make this a little bit thicker. So you kind of have to play with the scale here. So I could take this guy and copy and paste this. And now I want to like have this kind of sitting over the top of this so I can cut this shape away. So all I would do is select both of them, shape builder tool, hold down Alt and delete these two, and it leaves me with this shape. So essentially you can cut away any shape as you go. And sometimes just building a logo is just using these simple positive and negative space kind of tricks here. Okay, now for this one. I could actually, I'm going to do this. I'm going to double click on this path. You know what, let me go back here. Sometimes it's a little finicky, like where you're clicking. Let me zoom in. I'm going to make this actually much thicker than it needs to be, like much wider. Oh, I just changed the shape of that. So actually I want to go to my white arrow tool and I can just like grab this side. There we go. And drag this down. So I'm making it a little wider than I need to be. You have to zoom in to do that. Like sometimes it's really hard to move a line like that. Okay, so this I am going to, with my black arrow tool, move this over And essentially, I'm going to connect these two. So watch, I can grab over both of them. So I just created two shapes overlapping, and then I'm going to connect them with the shape builder tool. So click and just drag over it all. But then I want to create this kind of curve. So a really easy way to do that would be either to cut away some circles or the eraser tool. Let's just use that. And I'm kind of looking, I made my brush big enough to kind of cut it away, but we want it to be really even. So I'm really looking at both sides to make sure that they're nice and even. So see how I quickly just cut that away, and it automatically just like kind of created this cool shape here. So I can kind of play with that. I do want to make sure I click off of it to see it. It's a little bit wonky, so I'm going to go and smooth it out. And just try to make it as good as possible. It could go up and like start moving anchor points around and things like that, but sometimes it's just easier to start again if it's looking off. Another way, let me just step back, to cut away. So I've joined these guys together, right? I could really perfectly create a circle tool. Let me just change the color so you can see. And then take my arrow tool, and I just really, really will align it. And then I can hold Alt to duplicate it and Shift to keep it right in alignment, and just make sure I get it really perfectly aligned there and centered. And then I can grab all of those and go to the shape builder tool, hold Alt to get it to minus, and get rid of those. That made it a little bit neater rather than using the eraser tool. There's still like just the littlest bit right there that would bug me. So the little details do count. So it's looking pretty good. The bottom now is just a little more pointy. And like I said, it doesn't have to look exactly the same, but just so you can remember, you can change the anchor points. If you want something to be less curved, you can always, this will flatten. These little handles flatten things out. And then of course I could just do a ellipse tool in the center and add a white fill. So right here, I've just kind of created a pretty decent paintbrush. So once you have the basic shapes laid out, I would highly recommend dragging over all of them and Control G to group it together. That way, if you need to move it around or change things, it will move as one. So from this point, I have a very basic kind of icon, but I do want to add in some shapes and things like that. So this would definitely work like as part of a logo or something, but I do want to modify it a bit. So first of all, I'm going to double click on these anchor points and just kind of make the width a little bit, wider at the top. And then also another thing you could do is like take the eraser tool and kind of like, I don't know, like make a couple jagged spots there, just so it's not perfect. So click off of it and kind of look. I like that. And then let's think about maybe adding in some of this detail, some of the bristles, maybe a few highlights or shadows when you look here. So I could definitely use the line tool. And remember, like if you hold Shift, it keeps it in perfect proportion. So I could just like draw a couple of these little details even to help with that. Maybe, I mean, there's a few different ones of different line variations, so that could be kind of neat to play with, just to add a little bit of detail. So there's one there. We hold Alt and use my key commands to try to, there's like a thicker one there. I can use my arrow tools as well to like make things up. And then I always like to like have things go from thick to thin and just play with the uniformity as well. So it just depends on what you're making. I don't know if this will look strange or not, but let's try it out. So that just adds a little bit of detail. I mean, I could do some of the side lines and things like that. You could use your pencil tool to do like, say, a little bit of highlight here. Just keep it nice and smooth. It kind of smoothed out for me. I could turn the opacity down if I wanted some grayscale and it to just look like a slight little highlight. Those little highlights and those little just, I guess, pieces of dimension, they do make a big difference. And then maybe I do the same for some of the bristles, like just do a couple lines maybe and have them go from thick to thin. Oops, I accidentally made two. No, I didn't. Okay. Hold Alt or copy paste. Maybe just change. That didn't work. Control C, Control V. If you Control F, it copies and pastes it to the front layer. So sometimes that's helpful too. So Control C to copy something. Control F, paste it in front. So, you know, depending on the order you do things, it'll copy and paste to the back or to the front. So sometimes it's easier to just press Control F and it pastes it on the front layer. So I think that's a pretty nice little brush. And now I'm just going to group that all together again, Control G. And then I could go in too, and I could go in individually and change some of the colors too. Maybe first though, I would copy and paste that. So I have a black and white version, and then I can do a color version. So if it's not letting you select each part of the group individually, sometimes I just go to the white arrow tool, and then I'm able to like, okay, grab some colors and move things around, or just right click and ungroup it first before you do that. So anytime like you realize something's a little off, like I'm going to right click and ungroup this because I grouped it all together. This is missing the outline. So I can just, I've grouped it together twice. So I have to right click, ungroup again, maybe even 3 times. Yes, right click, ungroup. So sometimes you can have ungrouped, you could have grouped things a couple times too many. Okay, so I just wanted to shift that. I also added this little dot, which I really like. I could add all 4 if I wanted to, but maybe I need a little dot as well in the black and white version. So after you do your black and white version, what you're going to do is just copy and paste that and create a colored version. So you saw me do that. I literally just clicked each section and then took the eyedropper tool and clicked some colors from the original photo. But now what I want to do is I'm going to just group this back together so I don't mix it up. And I have to group this together too because I added that little white circle. Okay, so you're going to have a black and white bold, no outlines. A color, this has no outlines. And then I want to do one with just outlines, just so you can practice some variations. So I'm going to take this guy and copy and paste him again. Oops. Go to my arrow tool and move it up here. And then all I need to do is, oh, I didn't have this on there. Let me, oops, go back and grab this again. Copy and paste. Okay, there it is. Okay, so I'm going to have 3 variations. Now this one, I just want to play with the outline. So I want to make an outlined object like in some of the examples I showed you. So I'm going to go up here, and right now it has all different kinds of strokes and fills because there's a bunch of shapes combined, so it's confused. But that's okay. This is my fill, or I can go over here. It says, I don't know. What is your fill? I'm going to turn the fill off. Now it's just the outlines, and I'm going to go here to stroke, and I'm going to turn it to black. I could do it up here as well. Now I'm going to ungroup this so that I can go in and change each individual stroke. So this right now, it looks a little too thick now. I have to ungroup it again. Sometimes it takes a few times. I can also go in with my white arrow tool and just grab this. But then sometimes my options for my stroke disappear. So I'm going to just ungroup several times. I really like to make my stroke stuff different from here, but there is a stroke panel as well over here. So you can play with the thickness of the stroke and stuff on this side as well. So I just didn't like how thin these stroke lines were. So I can go in and play with the stroke here, play with the uniformity, and just change this all up. Another thing is if you play with the uniformity in the stroke panel, sometimes you have to go to show options, this little drop down menu to see all of this. But this little line here moves the thick and thin areas along the path here. It's not really working right there, of course. But sometimes it'll move like where it gets thick and where it gets thin. So I actually like it just solid. I don't think I want the uniformity on for that. But I can definitely play with the thickness and things like that. Where this is not working, so I'm going to just move that up. I like a little bit of space. The little bristles are looking funny though, so I'm going to go in, and then this too I'm going to make completely black. Change the opacity of that. So these little bristles, I have to either go with each with a white arrow tool and just double click and bring them down so they're smaller, like so with each one. Double click, bring it down. I could also take the eraser tool and erase it if I needed to as well. Oh, I have to select it first. Otherwise the eraser tool does not work. Oh, and I don't want to go too far. Okay, actually didn't even bother my outline, so that's good. Okay, so now I have my different variations. And sometimes I just play with the fill as well, like maybe fill in some different things that I didn't on the other one just to have some contrast. So you're going to be turning in a black solid shape, a black outline, and then a colored variation with a few highlights or shadows, just a few details on it. So one last thing, I just wanted to look at the stroke panel again. It's right here. And remember, you can always go to window and find a panel like stroke if it's missing. There's a couple other things though. If you go here and you show options, so the upper right, you have to show options to see all of these. Another thing that I really like to do is if I keep my line just plain and it doesn't have any like uniformity, you can change the end cap and make it round. So that kind of adds some character too. So like here, these lines, you can't really tell if you have the uniformity on, but sometimes it's really nice to like have a round end cap. See, this is the square end cap. That's the round. So I really like that variation as well. So if you have some just plain lines and make them a little thicker so you can see them, just make your end cap round. You can also do that with corners and stuff too. So I could round the corners and just kind of play with line in that way as well. I just discovered that you can also divide up a shape and make it into separate parts. So if you have a shape and then say you have the line tool or a pencil tool and it's dividing the shape like this, you have to make sure that your lines go exactly from the top path to the bottom path. You don't want there to be like any gaps at all. So like it's not going to work if like it's not touching the bottom line path. So like it can't be like this. If you have any little gaps, you got to go with your little white arrow tool and just stretch it out and make it long enough to cover that. But anyway, you can divide up a shape and then just select the whole shape. And then you can go to the shape builder tool, and instead of clicking and dragging to connect the different areas, you're just going to click on each area and it's going to make it its own shape. And then you can go with your white arrow tool. So click off of it and you can change each fill and stroke of each area. So click on the line because this is empty and go to the fill. And see, I can change each area as its own shape now. I think I could even select it and move it away with my black arrow tool.